I remember the summer of 1972 vividly. It was the year a mysterious carnival rolled into Willow Creek, setting up just outside town. I was 13, and for a kid like me, it was like something out of a dream. Everyone was buzzing about it, especially kids my age. Mom was hesitant about me going, though. She had her reasons. She always worried about me more than most mothers worried about their boys. After all, it was just her and me since Dad walked out when I was 7, leaving her to make ends meet at the diner. But Sam, my best friend, convinced me it'd be the adventure of a lifetime. Sam had a way with words, a way of making anything sound possible. And that summer, the carnival became our obsession. On the carnival's opening night, Sam and I snuck out after dark. The field where they set up was on the edge of town, beyond the old sawmill. I remember the dazzling lights, the music that felt like it was pulsing right through me, and the strange, intoxicating smells of caramel, popcorn, and smoke. Everything seemed larger than life. The rides, the sideshow tents, even the Ferris wheel that turned slowly, its lights blinking against the night sky. We wandered around, eyes wide, taking it all in. There were fire breathers, fortune tellers, and contortionists who twisted their bodies in ways that seemed almost impossible. I was mesmerized. That's when we met Mr. Grayson. He ran the funhouse, a tall, thin man with a sharp smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was charming in the way that adults who work with kids often are, but there was something unsettling about the way his gaze lingered just a moment too long. It made the hair on my neck stand up. The way he spoke, too smooth, too calculated, gave me a shiver that I tried to brush off. A few days later, I noticed that things were starting to change around town. Kids from school, kids I knew, started acting strange. They were quiet, distracted, like they were carrying some heavy secret. Sam, who usually had a joke for everything, became unusually tight-lipped, especially when I brought up the carnival. One evening, while I was helping Mom close up the diner, I saw Lily, a girl from my class, out back, whispering with Mr. Grayson. She looked nervous, her eyes darting around like she was afraid of being caught. When I called out to her, she jumped and quickly brushed me off. "Mind your own business, Michael," she snapped, her voice shaky, her face pale. I remember the way she hurried away, and the way Mr. Grayson just stood there, smiling at me before turning and disappearing into the shadows. That smile stuck with me, the kind that told you there was more beneath the surface, something dark and untrustworthy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. A few nights later, I followed Sam back to the carnival. He'd been acting strange too, distant, secretive, and I needed to know why. I kept my distance, staying in the shadows as he made his way past the rides and tents, all the way to the far end of the field. There, behind one of the tents, I saw him with a group of men. They were handing him something, a small package. Sam looked scared, but when I stepped out and called his name, he turned on me, his eyes wide with panic. "You need to leave, Mike," he hissed. "You don't understand. Just go." I could hear the fear in his voice, and it made my stomach drop. This wasn't the Sam I knew. This was someone who was trapped, cornered. The next few days, the whole town was buzzing with rumors. Tools and equipment had gone missing from sheds and garages, and even money had disappeared from the local store. The adults started whispering about the carnival workers, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. Mom warned me to stay away, but I couldn't. I had to know what was happening. I had to know what Sam had gotten himself into. I couldn't let it go, not when I saw how scared he was. And maybe, deep down, I felt guilty. I had been the one who pushed him to go to the carnival in the first place. I had made him think it would be fun, that it would be an adventure. One night after everyone had gone home, I decided to sneak into the funhouse. I waited until the lights were out and the carnival grounds were quiet. Then I slipped inside. The air was thick, musty, and the strange mirrors twisted my reflection into grotesque versions of myself as I crept through the narrow, winding halls. My own face looked back at me, distorted and monstrous, and I tried to ignore the growing sense of dread gnawing at my insides. At the back of the funhouse, I found a door, slightly ajar. Inside, there were crates filled with stolen goods, tools, electronics, even stacks of cash. And there were papers, maps, plans, details about a heist. They were planning to rob the town bank. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. I turned, and there was Mr. Grayson, his face half hidden in shadow, his smile gone. Behind him were two of the men I'd seen with Sam. My heart pounded as they closed in on me, and Mr. Grayson spoke, his voice calm, almost gentle. "You shouldn't have come here, Michael," he said. They grabbed me and I struggled, panic clawing at my throat. They dragged me through the back door of the funhouse, out into the night. And that's when I saw Sam. He was standing there, his face pale, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Mike," he whispered. "They said they'd hurt my family if I didn't help." Realization hit me like a punch to the gut. My own curiosity, my own insistence on going to the carnival had led us here. I had encouraged Sam to come with me that first night. I had made him part of this, and now I had to fix it. I twisted, kicked, managed to break free from the men's grip, and I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, through the carnival, past the tents and the rides, all the way to the sheriff's office. I remember the gravel crunching under my feet, my lungs burning, and the way the lights of the carnival blurred behind me. It was like running out of a nightmare, everything distorted, surreal, and terrifying. The authorities moved quickly after that. The sheriff and his deputies raided the carnival just as Mr. Grayson and his men were preparing for the heist. They found the stolen goods, the plans, everything. Sam confessed, and they showed him leniency. He was just a kid after all, and they knew he'd been coerced. They understood that he was just trying to protect his family. The carnival packed up and left town the next day, their bright lights and cheerful music disappearing down the highway like a bad dream. The posters that had once advertised fun and excitement were torn down, leaving behind nothing but scraps fluttering in the breeze. Life slowly returned to normal after that, but things were never quite the same. Sam and I drifted apart. I understood why. He couldn't stand to be around me, and I couldn't blame him. Every time he saw me, he was reminded of what had happened, of how close we had come to losing everything. I spent the rest of that summer helping Mom at the diner, trying to forget the look in Sam's eyes that night. The look that told me I'd betrayed him, even if I hadn't meant to. I threw myself into work, trying to drown out the guilt that gnawed at me. But it was always there, just beneath the surface. The carnival left behind a scar on Willow Creek, a sense of unease that lingered long after the tents were gone. People didn't talk about it much, but you could feel it. The way folks locked their doors a little earlier at night, the way they watched strangers with narrowed eyes, suspicion lurking just beneath the surface. The town had always been small, quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else. But after that summer, there was a shadow over it, a sense that maybe we didn't know each other as well as we thought. Looking back now, I realized that the summer of 1972 taught me a lot about trust, about how fragile it is, and how easily it can be broken, and about how the choices we make, even the ones that seem small, can have consequences we never imagined. I still think about Sam sometimes, and I wonder if he ever forgave me. I hope he did, because I never stopped being sorry. I think about the laughter we shared before everything went wrong, the way we used to dream about the adventures we'd have, the places we'd go, and I think about how, in the end, it was my desire for adventure that shattered everything. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the carnival music, faint and distant, like an echo from another time. And I remember the lights, the way they flickered against the dark sky, and I wonder if that carnival is still out there somewhere, setting up in another small town, luring in curious kids like me and Sam. And I wonder if those kids will make the same mistakes we did, if they'll ignore the warnings, if they'll get too close to the shadows. I hope not. I hope they stay away. Because some adventures aren't worth the price you pay. That summer changed everything for me. It made me realize how much I needed to protect the people I loved, how much I needed to be there for them. I couldn't bring my dad back, I couldn't undo what happened with Sam, but I could try to be better. I could try to be the kind of person who didn't put the people he cared about in danger. The kind of person who knew when to walk away from something that seemed too good to be true. Willow Creek eventually moved on, but the scars remained. The old field where the carnival had set up became overgrown, the grass tall and wild, hiding any trace of what had happened there. People stopped talking about it, but they never forgot, and neither did I. Every time I drive past that field, I remember the lights, the music, the laughter, and I remember how quickly it all turned dark, how quickly a dream can become a nightmare, and I remind myself that some mysteries are better left unsolved. Story 2. Returning to Harborville felt strange. It had been years since I'd last set foot in my hometown, and the once thriving coastal town now seemed quieter, almost hollow. In 1972, I was a 20-year-old college student, and that summer I came back home to help my younger sister Emily, who was struggling after our parents' divorce. Harborville, a place that once echoed with laughter and salty sea breezes, now carried an unfamiliar heaviness. I tried to be strong for Emily, even though I could barely make sense of things myself. She was just 15, caught in the middle of our parents' shouting matches, and I knew I had to be there for her. It was early July, and I remember the way Emily's face lit up when she told me about the carnival. A traveling show had rolled into town, setting up on the outskirts near the old shipyard. The Ferris wheel loomed above the tents, a giant circle of lights that could be seen from nearly every corner of Harborville. For Emily, it was an exciting distraction, a chance to forget our parents arguing. She begged me to take her, her eyes wide with hope. Part of me thought it might help us reconnect, help her smile again, so I agreed. I had no idea that decision would lead us into the darkest weeks of our lives. The carnival was alive with color and sound, twinkling lights, the distant screech of metal on metal as rides swung back and forth, the laughter of children, and the smell of popcorn mixed with the sharp tang of sea salt. Emily and I strolled through the aisles between attractions, the warm summer air buzzing with excitement. That's when we stumbled upon Madame Serena, a fortune teller whose tent was draped in dark, velvety fabric, with painted stars and moons that shimmered in the low light. Emily was enchanted, insisting on having her fortune read. Despite my skepticism, and truth be told, an uneasy feeling that settled in my gut, I relented. I watched as Emily sat across from Madame Serena, her eyes wide with curiosity. Madame Serena had a strange aura about her, her eyes dark and knowing, her fingers adorned with rings that caught the flickering candlelight. Her voice was low, melodic, as she spoke of cryptic warnings. She mentioned a great change, secrets in the shadows, and danger near the water. Emily, of course, was captivated, while I sat in the corner, fidgeting. Something about the reading unsettled me, but I tried to brush it off as nothing more than carnival theatrics. I figured the fortune teller was just trying to keep Emily hooked, spinning vague stories that could apply to anyone. Over the next few days, things began to change. Emily grew distant, spending more and more time at the carnival. She'd come home late, her eyes filled with something between excitement and fear. She told me that Madame Serena was mentoring her, teaching her about tarot cards and how to read the future. I couldn't understand it. Why was she so enthralled by this woman? I tried to intervene, tried to get her to stay away, but Emily pushed back, her words sharp and filled with anger. "You don't understand me, Laura. You never have," she yelled one night, slamming the door to her room. The words stung because, in a way, they were true. I had been away at college, and Emily had been left to face the worst of our parents' crumbling marriage alone. Maybe this carnival was the only escape she had. It was around then that I met Jack. He was a photographer, or so he said, documenting the carnival for a local magazine. He had a charming smile, an easy confidence that made it simple to trust him. He offered to help me keep an eye on Emily. We spent time together at the carnival, watching her from a distance as she helped Madame Serena, running small errands, setting up her tent, carrying her cards and trinkets. But something about Jack didn't add up. There were inconsistencies in his stories, details that didn't quite fit. One evening I found him not photographing the carnival, but instead taking pictures of the town's infrastructure, bridges, power lines, security systems. I confronted him, demanded to know what he was doing, but he dodged my questions, his easy charm slipping for just a moment, replaced by something cold and calculating. Around the same time, Harborville began experiencing strange accidents. Small fires broke out in alleyways, power outages left entire neighborhoods in darkness, and the phone lines went down more than once. Panic began to spread among the residents, whispers of bad luck and sabotage floating through the town like an invisible fog. The carnival, once a source of excitement, now seemed to cast a shadow over Harborville. People began to eye the workers with suspicion, and I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack's interest in the town went far beyond photography. I decided to dig deeper. I went through Jack's bag one night when he wasn't around. Inside, I found blueprints of the town, detailed maps marking critical points, the water supply, the power station, the bank. My stomach turned as the pieces started to fall into place. The carnival wasn't just a carnival. It was a front for something far more sinister, a group planning to sabotage the town, to drive property values down and force people out. They were preparing Harborville for a corporate takeover, and Emily, unknowingly, had been helping them. Through her sessions with Madame Serena, she had shared information, details about the town, about the people, about our lives. Realization hit me like a cold wave, and I knew I had to act quickly. I confronted Jack again, and this time he didn't deny it. He admitted he wasn't a photographer, but before he could say more, we heard footsteps, carnival workers approaching. Jack's demeanor changed instantly. He grabbed my arm, pulling me into the shadows, his voice low and urgent. "I'm not one of them," he said. "I'm trying to stop this, but you need to trust me." It was hard to believe him, but there was something in his eyes, a desperation that made me think he might be telling the truth. Together, we went to the local police. It took some convincing, but eventually, the sheriff agreed to investigate. The night of the raid was tense. Jack and I watched from a distance as the police moved in. They found evidence of the sabotage plans, blueprints, chemicals, stolen items. Madame Serena and several others were arrested, but not before they tried to run. The carnival workers scattered like leaves in the wind, and by dawn, the entire carnival had packed up and disappeared, leaving behind nothing but empty tents and trampled grass. Emily was shaken. She hadn't realized what she'd been part of, how her desire for something magical had been twisted and used against her. We sat by the water the next morning, the sun rising over the harbor, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Laura," she said. I wrapped my arm around her, holding her close. "It's not your fault," I replied, and I meant it. She had just wanted to escape, to find something beautiful in a world that had become too harsh. We both had. After everything, I realized how important it was to stay vigilant, to question the things that seemed too good to be true. Harborville eventually returned to normal, but the scars of that summer remained. People were more guarded, more careful, and Emily and I, we grew closer. The experience had shown us how easily we could lose each other, how fragile our bond was if we didn't nurture it. I decided to write about what had happened, to tell the story of the carnival that came to Harborville and the secrets it hid behind the bright lights and cheerful music. It was the first real story I ever wrote, the one that convinced me to pursue journalism. Sometimes, even now, I think about Jack. I never saw him again after that summer. I don't know if he really was an undercover agent, or if he had his own reasons for wanting to stop the carnival. But I like to think he was one of the good guys. And I think about Madame Serena, her dark eyes and the way she spoke, as if she knew things none of us could understand. I wonder where she is now, if she's still out there, setting up her tent in another town, luring in another young girl with promises of magic and mystery. The Ferris wheel is gone, but sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the creak of its metal frame, still see the lights blinking against the dark sky. and I remind myself that not everything that glitters is gold, and sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows.